There's a word in modern society that can end a conversation instantly. A word powerful enough to shut people down, divide communities, and even destroy reputations. That word is racism. Now, before anything else, a small caveat. Racism, the belief that one race is inherently superior or inferior to another, is morally wrong. History has shown the catastrophic consequences when humans begin to rank other humans according to race. Events like the Holocaust, systems like apartheid, stand as reminders of how destructive those ideas can become if they're embraced at scale. But rejecting racism does not mean that we should avoid asking deeper questions about human nature itself. You see, when we look at human history, honestly, one pattern appears again and again. People organise themselves into groups. For most of our existence, survival depended on small communities. Families, clans and villages relied on each other to hunt, share resources and defend territory. Loyalty to the group was not just a social preference, it was essential to survival. When another group appeared on the horizon, they were rarely seen as neutral strangers. More often than not, they were potential competitors for land, food, safety or influence. And because of that long history, humans developed strong instincts towards cooperation within their group and caution to those outside of the group. And you can still see this pattern everywhere in the modern world. We've got football supporters who fiercely defend their club and view any rival team with hostility. Towns and cities carry deep rivalries that go back generations. Businesses compete aggressively with their competitors like they're at war. And then we've got nations that rally around their flags, histories and identities. So psychologists often refer to this as an in-group and an out-group bias, a tendency to favour those that we see belonging to our group and to distrust those that we see as outsiders. And one of the clearest demonstrations of this, and it became a famous book and film called Lord of the Flies, was the Robbers Cave experiment, where researchers divided a group of boys at a summer camp into two teams. Within days, the boys developed strong loyalty to their own group and hostility towards the other, even though the groups had been randomly selected and had no prior history with each other. That experiment showed how easily humans form tribes once a boundary between us and them exists. And those boundaries can be drawn in many, many ways. We've got religion, nationality, politics, sports teams, culture, or ethnicity. Race, in that sense, becomes one possible marker of this identity, but amongst many others. And in Western society today, race carries a particular moral weight because history has shown what happens when racial hierarchy becomes an organising principle of society. The rejection of racism became a conscious, ethical standard aimed at preventing the kind of suffering seen in the world wars, as we've talked about the Holocaust, and also this inherent guilt that a lot of people in the West have over their perceived injustices against other people during the colonial period. Now, at the same time, it's worth recognising that attitudes towards identity and group preference are not identical across the globe. Some societies openly prioritise their own ethnic or national group. In some places, social structures have historically reinforced hierarchy and separation, such as the Indian caste system. And this continues to organise communities into inherited ranks that they will never be able to deviate from. And then in other regions, the Middle East, for example, strong ethnic identity remains central to how people define their nation and their place within it. And these realities raise a very interesting question. If we asked the people across the globe, whether you need to do that in private or public, whether they had a stronger sense of loyalty or connection towards their own group, and that's whether it's defined by culture, nationality, religion, or ethnicity, if they answered honestly, how many would say yes? Human beings naturally seek belonging, shared language, shared customs and shared experiences, and they all create bonds that make people feel safe and secure. That instinct for belonging is so powerful. It can, on the one hand, bring communities together, encouraging cooperation and strengthening social ties, but on the other hand, when group identity becomes a measure of human worth, it crosses a dangerous line. Civilization has always been about guiding human instincts with moral principles. Acknowledging that humans naturally form groups does not mean that all of a sudden that we're accepting discrimination or hostility towards others. It simply means that we recognise that the forces that shape human behaviour, so that we're aware of them. At the end of the day, we can't deny that tribal instincts exist because history shows it time and time again. What we need to do, though, rather than bending over backwards because we have this inherent sense of guilt towards others, is accept that it is something that is part of every human and every community, but ensure that our instincts towards being part of a group don't make us cruel towards others. Because the strength of a civilization is not measured on how perfectly we behave. It's measured by the principles we choose to live by and whether or not they're able to overcome the instincts that want to drag them in a different direction.